Welcome again. After having a few ideas about privacy issues that are emerging in present context, let us now discuss about how uh, the framework for data privacy should be designed in current context. Uh, in our conventional settings, data privacy is often considered to be synonymous with secrecy or non-disclosure of information. And it's like black and white view. And it is also apparent till now in app-based services too. So whenever an user want to avail some service, he or she needs to give up all control on the data that are being collected um, by that merchant uh, uh, just at the cost of getting that service, uh, or uh, he or she just don't want to give up control, and then that particular user cannot access that service. When if you look at the terms and conditions that we need to accept before availing any services, be it app based, mobile app based services, or any kind of web services, or anything which are supposed to be through free availed through free subscription or some nominal paid subscription. So it's kind of black and white view, all or none policy. Still it is going on, but as we are moving towards a different kind of scenario, and the issues we have seen which were discussed in the last two lectures, so it should not be like that. I mean, if we want to proceed with proper trust between the service provider and service getters, we need to consider privacy as uh, exercise of control over personal data. So we would like to ensure that users should have some control to prevent the disclosures of their personal data in some control mechanism. I mean, it is not just black and white. The personal data, though we know they are not owned by themselves, because these data are being generated without any effort. So when we have discussed ownership, we have already come to know that the owner of that data may be the data aggregators and collectors, but users, since these data are about them, must have some control. It should not be like that the data collectors and aggregators, since they are paying a lot of effort to generate meaning of their personal data, so they can use this data at any way they want. Users, um, uh, the personal data about whom these data are, they should have some control over this type of data. So this is the basic principle of the frame. This would be the basic principle of modern framework for privacy. So I mean, the control uh, can be like this. I mean, users should have a clear idea about nature and categories of personal data to be shared, and they should have a control that whether what type of data they would like to share and what uh, are not. I mean, they may not share the sensitive personal data to everywhere. So this nature and categories of personal data to be shared should be known, and should be under users' control. Similarly, users should have control over the purposes for which shared data is to be processed. I mean, they should, uh, service provider or data collector must advertise that we are taking your data for these purposes, and user must have some say that okay, I'm giving this data, but only for this purpose. You cannot use this for these purposes. So this type of control should be there. I mean, some mechanism should be there so that users can exercise this type of control. Similarly, users should have control over their personal sharing their personal data to the collectors who are collecting at the first place, maybe called as principal collector, that with whom they are going to share that data in turn later point of time. So that should be under users control also. Similarly, users must have a clear picture from that service provider that what would be the consequences of the failure of provide personal data. Suppose I am not giving some of my data, I am not giving up the control over some categories of my personal data, then how much I will lose, what I will get just by providing the subset of data. So it should not be all or none. Like if I want to get the service, I have to just give up control to all categories of my data. I have to accept any kind of purposing of data. This should not be accepted in this coming upcoming framework of privacy design. There should be some gradual um, uh, kind of um, sharing, so that users based on his or her understanding can share certain portion of their personal data and may get a partial service, and that should be there in the framework. So basically loss of privacy in this particular context should be considered or maybe considered equivalent as loss of control over personal data. And and as a principle of privacy design, we need to create as a technocrat or business organization should create the principle to justify this control, so that this whole framework works fine. It instills trust between the service providers and service getters. Now, another issue I would like to point out, that this mm, whole discussion about privacy will be incomplete if we just limit our discussion in the data collection and aggregation process, because it is also very much dependent on the data analysis part, as you have already seen in case of retrospective data analysis. Uh, while collecting the data, it is not always possible to understand the exact use of that data. So suppose the data collectors have collected the data, including many kinds or categories of personal data, but in order to preserve privacy, how much they can do with, I mean, they are not allowed to do everything that is possible by the technology in order to preserve privacy. So data analysis also is a very key um, aspect for privacy. I mean, either you are preventing some portion of data during collection, or you might be allowed to collect everything, but in order to prevent privacy, you are not supposed to use all data for uh, your analysis or learning. So how to ensure that? So privacy preserving data analysis is very much important. We need to have some idea when we are discussing this data privacy. So basically, uh, in a most conservative way, the in order to ensure privacy preserving data analysis, uh, many data analysts or researchers or professionals, they opine that data analyst should not know anything new about a particular individual by processing some data. So either you prepare your data in such a manner, or you design your analysis or learning phase in such a manner that by mining that data that's collected, nothing new on a particular individual should be known. Like the data analysis may yield some new finding over a collective manner. But for individual users, it should not know anything new. So if you ensure that, then it will be preserving the privacy. But this is very much conservative in the sense that it may not be possible in many modern settings. I'm giving an example, like suppose you are performing a medical study by compiling a lot of medical data from a lot of users, where every individual have participated and they have declared whether they have hypertension or not, because your just medical study was trying to find a correlation between the hypertension with probability of heart attack. Now, it was found by compiling um, data from several thousand users that the hypertension yields higher probability to heart attack. It's a overall finding. It apparently doesn't say anything about individual user, but it is not true. Actually, so if a person is having hypertension, so he is having higher probability of heart attack. So health insurance companies may use this data for every individual client and ask them to declare whether they have hypertension or not, and based on that they may charge different premiums from different individuals. And as an individual participant, participant now he may claim that it is finding new thing for me, that and for that I have to pay more premium, and so it is breaching my privacy. But if we look at carefully, it is not true. It is not true. It is, though it is finding something new for that particular individual, but that individual cannot claim that this type of survey has or study has made some compromise with his or her privacy. The idea is that uh, because if that particular individual even was not participating in that study, the result would have been the same. With 1,000 user, whatever result was interpreted, without participation of that particular individual, result would have been the same. And so health insurance company would have been decide with the same logic, and that person would have suffered the same thing. So it doesn't depend, the study, the result of the study doesn't depend on the participation of any individual users. So this gives, this particular observation acts as the basis of a new kind of privacy notion, which is called differential privacy. So if a statistical outcome is indistinguishable, regardless whether a particular user or particular field of record is included or excluded from the total data. So the outcome of any analysis is essentially equally likely, independent of whether any individual joins or refrains from joining the dataset. So this, in that case, it will be assumed that it is satisfying privacy of a particular kind called differential privacy. And this is a new notion that has come. If you are interested, you can read this paper. This is a very, very good paper on external and differential privacy, written by several researchers working on data science, privacy related issues, working in Microsoft Research and uh, different prestigious universities. Thank you.